Hey guys, in today's video I want to talk to you about assessing a second-hand bike for purchase. Obviously, if your budget doesn't stretch to a new bike, you're going to be looking second-hand. What the purpose of this video is today is to walk you through checking the bike over to make sure it's the sweet deal that you think it is, and not get caught out by somebody telling you it was just serviced or owned by a mechanic or just been at the shop. Okay? We all see these things happen from time to time. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but buyer beware, make sure that you're doing your due diligence on your new second-hand bike. Let's tuck in. The first thing I want you to think about is what's called the M-check. Alright, so the M-check is a way of assessing a bike for either purchase or pre-ride or post-ride, just to make sure that it's safe and worthy of riding and going to perform up to how you want it to. So the M looks like this. Capital M. I know, seems really easy, right? Let's get started. So I always start at the back of the bike. First thing I always check when I'm assessing a bike is whether there's play in the hub or the rear axle. Okay, so you're going to grab a part of the frame that's nice and sturdy. You're going to grab the top of the wheel and you're going to try and rock it backwards and forwards to see whether there's any knocking or play. Alright, if you find knocking or play, just make sure first of all that the rear axle is done up tight, because that can be a source of knocking and play. Once that's done, just check it again, and if there's knocking, then it could be bearings, or it could be the hub or the free hub or something like that. Okay. While you're down here, check the condition of the rear brake disc for notches between where it's all held onto the bike and the braking surface. Check that the caliper is nice and firm and mounted correctly, and have a look down in there to see whether there's plenty of meat on the pads. Next up, what you're going to look at is the condition of the rig set. So give it a spin and just check for large amounts of wear. On some bikes these can be quite expensive, so it pays to know what you're up for. Also look at the rear derailleur. Make sure that there hasn't been any massive impacts or that it's visibly bent. Check the derailleur hanger, which is where the rear derailleur mounts, and make sure it's reasonably straight. From there, what you'll do is take it for a test ride and make sure it's going to shift smoothly through all the gears. Next part of the check is to check all the elements of the frame in the rear here, and then that'll bring you up to the suspension. So obviously if you're going hardtail, this isn't a massive part of the inspection, clearly, but what you want to do when it is a full suspension bike is to just lift it gently off the ground to see whether you can feel any play, okay, in these linkages, and lift it up by the saddle and see whether you can feel any movement. So what I'm doing here is pulling up on the saddle and pulling up slightly on the wheel just to see whether there's any play, and obviously pop it down on the ground, and if it makes any knocking, just try and determine where that's coming from. Next part of the check is the bottom bracket and crank arms. So you're going to want to grab the crank arm and move it. I'm trying to lever it forwards and backwards away from the bike, just to see whether there's any movement in this bottom bracket area. On this bike it's pretty good, which I'm really stoked about. If your bike comes with pedals, or the deal comes with pedals, give them a quick little spin just to see whether there's any grittiness or anything like that in there, just so you're aware of what the condition of them is. Next part is to check the condition of the frame, make sure there hasn't been any gear lever strikes or brake strikes on the top tube. Make sure there isn't any dings or cracks or scratches or anything like that you're not aware of. Making sure that your front up here is all nice and tight and tidy, frame wise. So the next part is to grab the front brake. Not only are you going to feel it for whether it needs a bleed, whether it's squishy or pulls into the bar, or pulls in too far, but you're going to pull the front brake on and gently rock the bike forwards and backwards while holding onto this part of the headset, and just seeing whether there's any knocking or play in that area of the bike. Okay, that can indicate that these bolts might be loose or misadjusted, or it might even indicate that there's bearings that require replacement in there. Next part is to check the stanchions, these parts here of the suspension, if it has suspension, just to see whether there's any wear, nicks or scratches. Also looking down into the seals to make sure that there's not a huge amount of gunk in there, any leakage of oil or anything like that. Pull on the front brake once again and give it a nice little bounce on the suspension and see whether it's making any whooshy noises or anything weird. Okay. The next thing to check while you're up in this area and holding onto the handlebars is the condition of the grips, and also pull on the rear brake, checking to see whether that's too squishy or not, whether it locks up, and then pulling on the brake just and trying to move the bike forward a little and seeing whether it's making any like squealing noises or anything like that, which might indicate that the brakes are contaminated. I can tell you these ones aren't contaminated. They've just been sat for about a week after having been washed and whatnot after the last race. Next part to check is, obviously we've covered off the condition of these stanchions, the condition of the lower legs of the forks, making sure they're all not looking too bad. Make sure that the front axle's done up, and repeat what we did in the rear. So grab onto probably the lower fork lower and see whether there's any rocking in that front hub, and make sure that that's all looking good. Check the rotor while you're down here, and also check the condition of the brake pads, and they're all looking pretty good. The next thing that you can check is whether the wheels are straight, and you can do that by placing your thumb on the fork lower and having it come close to the rim and seeing whether there's any movement or wobbles in the wheels. So you can do that in the front, you can also do that in the rear, and that'll indicate whether you've got any serious things that you really need to deal with. One thing I forgot to do while we're up here in this top part of the first part of the M was to drop the seat post. So you're going to want to check that that goes up and down smoothly without engaging the dropper seat post, leaning on it to make sure it doesn't go down by itself, and then also trying to pull up on it without it engaged to see whether it comes up all by itself. Aside from that, that's pretty much a complete check of a bike. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please like, please subscribe, and if you've got something that you thought I missed, please chuck a comment below. Share it with your friends, share it with anybody who's going to buy a second-hand bike, and just make sure you weigh up the cost of what some of these things are going to run you versus buying a new bike that has a warranty, that has all the backup and support of a local bike shop. If you get lost assessing any of these things and you need expert help, please approach your local bike shop. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help you. Until next time, we'll see you soon.